everybody, welcome to the Leicester Lives podcast, episode 4, in association with Nolita Coffee NYC. Quality New York coffee for your home, delivered directly to your home. There's a brand new relaunch for the business, come up in time for Black Friday and also for the Christmas period. So watch out for future news on that. Now, really looking forward to this podcast today because in front of me, I've got Mr. Kelso Simon, and I think he epitomises an interesting Leicester life. Kelso, thanks very much for coming down to the studio today and being a guest on the Leicester Lives podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure. I'm happy to be here. Really happy to be here.
Thanks very much, Kelso. Let's roll it all the way back. Tell me about growing up in Leicester.
Growing up on the Newfoundpool estate. Now, when you grow up in Newfoundpool, you sort of conjoin with New Parks. So you say you're from Newfoundpool, but it's New Parks. Do you understand what I'm saying? So Newfoundpool's at the bottom end of New Parks and then sort of goes on to Tudor Road. Yeah, so sort of anything north of Tudor Road is New Parks. Right. Anything west or east, depending where you're standing, is kind of Beaumont Lee's end. So yeah, growing up Newfoundpool estate, your typical working class white English estate, which was interesting for me because my dad is the original Windrush generation. Okay. He came here in 1959, my dad did. How he ended up in Leicester, I do not know, but he ended up in Leicester and he worked at the Fox's Glacier Mints factory.
Right.
Which was, a lot of immigrants worked there in them days, and then he ended up at Dunlop. So he met my mum, I think at a blues party. I don't know how that went down, but and then they bought a house originally in Highfields. These in the days when you could buy houses, you know, and then they moved to Newfoundpool, where I was born. Yeah, and, you know, good times growing up. They were good people. It's typical row of terraced houses kind of area, you know. Mum's on the doorstep, you know, with a cup of tea and a fag talking to kids. Can you remember the 9 o'clock horses years ago? Yeah, so we got told you better get in, the 9 o'clock horses will be out. And it was one of them typical estates. But what I can remember from being around there was, you know, life was good. My dad, like I say, he's 88 now, but, you know, back then we're talking early 80s. When I mention I'm from Newfoundpool, and you know, like I was saying to you, it was a typical working class white estate. If I mention that to people do tend to say, well, you know, did you encounter a lot of racism? There were bits and bobs, but to be honest, it was mainly love there. You know, I was just saying to you earlier when we was introducing myself when the cameras were off, if I go up to, my dad still lives in the same house. And if I go there to this day, before people ask how I am, they're asking, how's your dad? Is he still about? Yeah, he's still in the same house. So it was really one of them close-knit kind of areas, Newfoundpool, where everybody sort of knew each other. You knew who was running the local chipper. You knew them on first name basis. They came down your house. You knew who ran the local corner shops. If I ever went home and my dad weren't in, he was working late or whatever, I could go in someone's house that'd look after me until my dad got home. That's the kind of estate it was. It was such a community vibe growing up there in Newfoundpool.
I think that's how working class estates used to be, wasn't it, Kelso, back in those particular...
Yeah, back in them days, if you were working class, you stuck together, and that was it. Colour and stuff for me, when I think back, it didn't really come into it. And this is in the 80s, mind, you know, so don't get me wrong, if you fell out with somebody on the estate, you get the odd slur or whatever, but that wasn't exclusive to being black or mixed race or whatever. If you fell out with someone that was Irish, you give it the Irish slur. If you fell out with someone that was white, fat, whatever it may be. So it wasn't personal, you know, and it's when I think back, it really, you know, it's, for me, I might be biased, you know, nostalgia plays tricks on us, but it's one of the best places I could have grown up in, you know, because everybody really stuck together. You know, or you know who everyone's mum was, you know, everyone's dad. I mean, my mum worked at the local junior school where I went, English junior school. She was part-time cleaner there, and my dad worked in the factory. That's how it was. You know, you had time then. You back then, I suppose your missus could work part-time and come home and look after the kids, and the bloke could have a job in a factory working full-time, and it was all good. Everybody got what they needed. Now it's a bit different. Everybody's working full-time, mums, dads, whatever. that's just the way it is. But, you know, it's special looking back and thinking back on growing up.
So would you say it was a happy childhood growing up on the Newfound Pool?
It was a happy childhood growing up in the Newfound Pool. Yeah, sometimes, if I'm being frank, in the house it weren't always happy because my mum and dad, bit of a drinking culture going on, but I'm not going to down talk them because they always raised me with manners and to have respect. And then that was, if my mum heard me talking to someone bad on the street, especially an adult, that was it. You get a clip round the ear. And I used to be terrified in my area. If anybody used to say to me, I know you, I'm telling your dad, I'd be terrified. Please don't tell me dad, because he was stern. But that was a good way, you know, no matter what happened, no matter what we went through, it was always, you respect your elders, you have respect for people. If I hear you mouthing off in the street, you're bringing shame on me. So my dad only had to look at me, and that's just the way it was. And because I was like one of the only mixed-race kids in the area, everyone knew what my dad was. I couldn't hide. So I just used to, even though I was a mouthy kid, because to be honest, I was mouthy, but if anybody mentioned my old man, my mouth used to be shut. But they all knew who he was anyway, because they all loved my old man. And the ones that are still alive to this day, they still got respect for him, they still love him, they still always ask about him. So special memories for New Parks, Newfound Pool, always special memories, always close to my heart when I think about them places back in the day.
And what about school days, Kelso?
Well, I went to English Junior School. Great days, great teachers, when teachers could have a laugh with the students. And then after English, I went to New Parks Community College. Again, you know, you had Oldham Newtons next to New Parks, so you had the two schools, so you had New Parks and Oldham Newtons, so there was like a rivalry. From what I remember, all of the estate lads, you know, the game lads, I might get a stick for this, but they used to go New Parks, and all the lads from the Glenfield went to Oldham Newton, so there was a bit of rivalry there, but we all knew each other. But I do remember some interesting snowball fights happening, where, because the fence was literally, so we're snowballing through the fence, but some people, not naming anybody, used to cover the stones with snow, and then, but it was just all fun growing up, wasn't it? It was just all, the rivalry were there, but we were all mates, and it was just part of that mischievous sort of 80s, 90s kind of vibe, wasn't it? It was mischief. No one really wanted to hurt each other. We was just all having the crack, you know.
And going back to what you said about racism, or rather the lack of racism at that particular time, despite what possibly some people would have people believe these days, any racism accounted at school at all?
Yeah, I mean, you always got the odd bit, but for me, it was never really deep, because the same lads, if we was in another area, because, you know, Leicester in the 80s, 90s was very territorial. You had a lot of gangs. Yeah, you had the crazy gang, the Wongs. You had loads of different gangs. It was quite a territorial time in England, I think. So if I used to be at, let's just say I was in the city centre, a lad that might have given me a racial slur because we had a fallout a couple of days before, if he heard someone that weren't from the manor call me a racist name, he'd be dealing with him before I had the chance to. What you calling my mate? This or that, do you know? So to me, it was never personal. Whatever manor you were from, you were just New Parks, you were Newfound Pool. The same with anything. Colour and stuff, I don't think it was that deep, because we're all working class, we're all estate lads. So it weren't really about, well, he's this or he's that. If there was an Asian lad or a black lad growing up on an estate, that was it. That you're all estate lads, you're all from the same man. And the same as when I was younger, because my cousins lived in Highfields. You know, Highfields at the time in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, was mainly black and mixed race lads and Asian lads. But if there was the odd white lad, you know, he was part of them. It were the same. There was no, you know, you were just together. That's how, for me, that's the beauty of working class culture, because you all stuck together. I used to run from my house up to the top of the street and, can I have 50p? Remember 50p meter? Yeah, so your electric would run out. You'd need 50p to put in the meter so you could watch, I don't know, Blockbusters or whatever was on when you got home from school, Gordon the Gopher, whatever. You'd need 50p to put in the meter. That's how it was. And it was really close-knit. So all the the barriers today, which for me, racism will always be there. Sexism will always be there. Every ism will always be there. But to me, that's a minority of people. Good working class people, for me, will always stick together. They'll always have them kind of old school sort of values and morals.
100%. I think you're right. Old school values.
Yeah, the old school values. I'm 45 now. I know you're close to my age. You might be a little bit older. A little bit, but them old school values, you couldn't beat them. The old school values were there. It didn't really. Yes, it'd come into it every now and again with a race and with a this and with a that. But today, to me, it's just been hyper blown out the water. I'm a mixed race lad, 45 years of age. I woke up. I grew up in a working class, mainly white area. So, I probably should be talking about racism and this, that, and the other. But when I talk about growing up, racism's not one of the first things that comes to my head, because there was a lot more than that. Do you know what I mean? It was just about being a community, the community vibe, which is a shame, because I think it's disappearing, and it's a real shame.
And before we move on, I think what you're touching upon there, Kelso, is the fact when people refer to Leicester as a multicultural city, that was probably when it was at its multicultural height, because people were getting on, people were bonded together, people weren't involved in being divisive towards each other, people were living together in harmony. And we were touching upon earlier, maybe today, and we'll come back to this a little bit later on, there's people out there who seek to divide us rather than unite us. But often they're trying to come under the umbrella, they're trying to unite, when in fact the intention is to divide. But we'll come on to that.
Yeah.
So, your father's come over, Windrush generation.
59 he came over.
59.
My old man, bless him, yeah.
Settled in Newfoundpool. Good family upbringing, good old-fashioned values. But you did have some trauma at that particular time as well.
Yeah. I remember one incident particularly, and this is... we're going to talk about this later on, but obviously the reason why I wrote my book, which is what we're going to talk about, is because there was a lot of trauma that I needed to release. And somebody said to me, I can't even remember who it was, but somebody says, if you're ever suffering, if you're ever struggling in life with depression or overthinking, because overthinking's a big thing, write things down, then look back at it. Because you can write things down, then you can look back and you can think to yourself sometimes, did I actually feel like that then? So you sort of see how you felt and the progress that you've made. So I just started writing things down. When I used to read things back, I used to think to myself, I've actually got quite a gift here. I can follow this. So I wrote some of the traumatic stuff that happened in my childhood. Basically, one night was, it's not far from where we're sat now, it's just up the road. My dad got attacked, and he got attacked quite badly. He'd had a drink, bless him. Nothing wrong with that. He'd been work all week. Sure. He'd had a drink, so it was a bit worse for wear. And my dad could look after himself when he was ready. So we were staying at a friend's house, Mum and Dad were staying at a friend's house, staying there overnight, and we went back, and as we went into the flat, the old Victorian flats up Highfields, Gotham Street, they're still there. As we were walking up the stairs, a guy just come out with 2 knives in his hand and attacked my dad, just shoved my dad to the floor.
And this is somebody you've never seen before?
I'd seen him before. I think he was friends with a guy that my dad were going to, the family friend that we were going to see, if that makes sense. So, I think it turned out, for want of a better phrase, he wasn't all there, but he just steamed out at my dad with, he had 2 kitchen knives in his hand. I'm quite open to talk about it, and just started laying him into my dad with these knives. So as a 7-year-old kid, you're seeing your dad, your hero, yeah, with his hands like that, because he can't defend himself. It's come from nowhere, and somebody's just sort of stabbing away at my dad, and I can't do anything. My sister's there, she's screaming, my mum's screaming. My mum, who's a bit of a character, and who everyone knew in the Newfoundpool estate, well, she back in the day, my mum could have a bit of a row. So she's thought nothing other than to go and get a knife from the kitchen in the flat, and You know, she had to go back. You know, she weren't just standing there letting it happen. Fair play to a woman doing that. That's how my mum was back in the day. And yeah, my dad was, his face was cut to ribbons. And in the end, after the attack, my dad, the guy just sort of stopped and just went back into the fight. When the police came, he goes, yeah, I've done it. Something was going on. But my dad, you know, in front of his kids, has been cut to ribbons. His hands are cut, his face is cut. He's gone into the... First thing my dad did, he went into the sink, load of salt, you know, trying to stand firm because his kids are there. But then he went to the hospital to get stitched up, you know, and it was an experience like that that sort of plants in your brain from a young kid that nobody in life is safe, especially the people that you love. So when people talk about trauma, it's not the fact that you can, like, like, some people blame trauma on being a nasty person. Well, I've gone through this as a kid, I've gone through that as a kid. For me, trauma, what it does is it sort of moulded your brain. It moulded my brain, into, right, you've got to be hypervigilant from now on. You've got to be a hypervigilant person because something can always go wrong. So from that incident, this is just me tracing back and looking at myself when I had to really go to work on myself. This is like, from that moment, your brain started working in a certain way, and that was to be hypervigilant and waiting for something to go wrong. And that's where the overthinking came.
Because you touched upon the fact, and I think you're absolutely right. When you're 7 years old, your father is your hero.
He's the main man, ain't he? He's the main man.
I sometimes say to people, you know, at 7 years old, if my dad said he played centre forward for Chelsea, I would have believed him.
You'd have believed him. It was Superman, wasn't he? Your dad at 7 years of age.
And then to see your father, who is your hero, you've got the utmost respect for, and he's in that very, very vulnerable position of being attacked by the person.
But with not one knife, two knives. You know, chomping away while my dad's on the floor. I could talk about it now. I don't feel no anger. I don't feel, you know, like I'm going to break down or anything like that. But the reason why I'm talking about it, I'm so open about it. For one, I want to help other people that are struggling with mental health. And for two, I can talk about it now, where for years I couldn't. And that is a big thing, because we're talking obviously about myself, that is a big thing that moulded me. And that went on deep into my life. It didn't stop when I was 7. It went even into adulthood, from when I had my first child. That, now even to this day, it's still, you know, I can still be hypervigilant. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
So I'm very protective over my daughters now. Sometimes too overprotective. Not in a bad way, but like where they're rolling their eyes at me. But there's no eraser that can scrub that from your mind.
Absolutely.
But rather than... A lot of people, I think what I did is I didn't realise back, I must have been about 18, 19, I didn't realise it was a mental health thing, because you just think it's you. Do you understand what I'm saying? You just think that's the way you think.
So could we say up until 7 years old, it's a fairly happy-go-lucky childhood. This incident occurs, and then afterwards, as you said, your brain is reprogrammed, remoulded, and then you're a different child moving forward from that point.
Yeah, I think that's the right word to use, reprogrammed, because your brain sort of reprograms. But at the same time, you're a kid, so things can bounce off you when you're a kid. You don't know the depth of it. So part of me was still mischievous, mouthy, Kelso, you know, and then the other part of me was overthinking, anxious. But being anxious and the anxiety and all that kind of stuff didn't suit my personality. So the personality used to come through, because I was always a bit of a mischievous kid, always a bit mouthy, always a bit happy-go-lucky, always a bit brazen as a kid. So that sort of overshone it, kind of thing, which went on into my teens. So nobody would know. If I'd have bumped into you, because we know a lot of the same people, if I'd have bumped into you 10 or 20 years ago, oh, there's Kelso, he's a bit of a lad, you know. You wouldn't never think that things like that were going on.
100%.
And to be honest, I didn't, because I didn't know that, well, that kind of thing is not normal kind of thing, because what you grow up in is what's normal to you.
Absolutely.
So the way that you think, I just thought it was me. Well, this is the way I'm supposed to think. It's only when you get older and you start meeting other people that you think to yourself, well, actually, you know, there might be a few issues here. And that's when I thought to myself, well, I've got to start having a go at tackling this, you know what I mean? But I mean, I'm leaping forward a bit, because we're leaping forward now to when I started thinking about writing and stuff like that. But
sure, we'll bring it back. So from the 7-year-old, that changes because, like we said, the brain has been reprogrammed. We go through the school, you're very much as you always were, but you're burying quite deep down the trauma that you felt from this particular incident. What happened when you left school? Because obviously when you're at school, it's a closeted environment. You are relatively safe. I know we look back on schoolhood experiences with slightly rose-tinted glasses, but there is a big
nostalgia plays tricks on you, doesn't it? And when I left school, my biggest problem was, and it followed me a lot in my life, was I never knew what I wanted to do. And you know, I never thought to myself, right, I'm going to wake up in the morning and feel good doing this, or feel good doing that. So I just didn't know what I wanted to do. So I tried this, I tried that, didn't like it. And to be honest, I ended up bumming around a bit. I met one of my best mates, Kieran, best mate to this day, best man at his wedding. And he was in the same boat, you know, a couple of mixed race lads, a bit not knowing what we wanted to do. He's from Beaumont Leys, by the way. And we were just hanging around, you know, having a smoke, up to no good, bumming around the streets, and we both didn't really know what we wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do. It was only when my first daughter was born, because I was a teenage dad, so I had my first daughter when I was 19, and it was only when she was born when I thought to myself, you know, you've got to knuckle down now, mate. You've got to, because a lot of my mates, like I say, growing up in Newfound Pool, New Parks, everyone's even to this day, people are into trades. So everyone's dad was either a bricklayer or a plasterer or a roofer. So that was an easy road for them. And they were earning money. You know, back in like 95, 94, 95, some of my mates that were going out plastering and bricking or whatever, they were earning good dough.
Good money, yeah.
And here's me rolling around, you know, thinking, well, I've got a gyro to look forward to. So you start doing naughty things then, don't you? Because you don't like being skinned. It's not a nice feeling to be skinned. You know, it just strips you of everything, doesn't it? When you're skinned and you've got mates out that have got money, it just strips you of everything, all your sort of morale, everything. So you start doing naughty things, you know, a bit of this and a bit of that, to earn a bit of corn, to earn a bit of money. You start doing some naughty things. But I could never, doing the naughty stuff when I was that young, I could never be comfortable with it. It was never, do you know what I mean? If I had to, and I've got to mention that I'm not glorifying criminality in any way because I work with young people, but if I made money selling things, half the time I used to give it away. Well, yeah, I'll have that. You know, you know, I wasn't hustler minded. Some people are, some people ain't, and I was never, I couldn't sort of live like that. So I knew that I had to get something going, you know. And
possibly maybe due to your upbringing, because you said about how your father and your mother put you on this quite strong moral path. So
yeah,
you're a little bit older, you might be a little bit lost at that particular time, but those morals are still entrenched within you.
Yeah, and I couldn't be bothered, to be honest. I got mates that were earning good money, doing the naughty stuff, getting phone calls, or whether it were pages in them days, I don't know, whatever. But they were running around all that, and it just wasn't. Some people are cut out for that kind of life, and I was just never cut out for it. It's never something that I could get used to, but I did it anyway, because if I didn't, I was skinned, you know. So I did it anyway. Then when I was, I think I just had my daughter at 19. I got a factory job working at a place called Formwell Plastics in Thurmaston, which was a good steady income. You know, the boss there at the time was a really good guy. I went there on the agency. He gave me a chance. He says, you know, and it was like a steady, at the time, we're talking, I don't know, late 90s, something like that at the time. Like, I don't know, 250, 300 quid a week or whatever it was. You knew you were getting paid every week. It just settled me a bit. I started seeing less of certain people, and I was just earning a steady income. And I ended up working there for for 8 years. But it's weird because everything's sort of getting double crossed at the minute. But while all this was going on, before that, we were talking about the rave scene earlier on, so I got into the MCing as well.
I was wondering whereabouts in the timeline the rave.
Yeah, so the rave scene was like, can you remember years ago, you could remember this, when if you went to a commercial club in town, your Crystals or your Ritzes or whatever it was at the time, you had to have a button shirt.
Absolutely, yeah.
Pleated trousers and shoes. You had to look the part, you couldn't just go out how people are rocking up now. So I weren't really feeling that at the time. I like to be a bit raggedy, so I think we used to go to a place called Amnesia House. It was Club Rage. I bet you know some of the guys that used to DJ there and all that, MJP, or it was Clarky, Swanee. They had every DJ down there, but we used to go on the nappy night. Yeah, so you go on a Thursday night and it was like under 18s, but it was still cool because everybody used to go. So then one night, me and my mate Vinny Herman, a good lad, he's still about, and we says, well, the adult night's on a Friday, why don't we try that? So yeah, we'll see. So I can remember at the time, I had a little bum fluff moustache, still got it. But I can remember getting my sisters, because I've got an older sister who grew up with me in Newfoundland, but I can remember getting her mascara and just going like that and making it look black. I must have looked a right idiot. Yeah, but we went there on the Friday. I think they used to have the nappy night on the Thursday, and then they'd have the adults night on the Friday. But it was a good. It's Amnesia, It used to have all the top DJs, and because I was a bit tall for my age, it was about 92. I must have been born in 78. So what was I in 92? 14 or something like that. But because I was tall, I think the bouncer recognised me from coming on Thursday, but he just seen me as a face. So he didn't recognise that it was the Thursday.
Sure.
He just thought, well, I know him, he comes here every week. So he just let us in. And all of a sudden, we're in Amnesia on the adult night. The rave scene, I know it was dying down a little bit from the late 80s, but it was still massive. Still it was big, still there, the rave scene. And all of a sudden, we're raving in the adult night, and we used to go there every week and just rave, and it was, them days were brilliant. Again, you bring them rave days back now. I know it went a bit, tits up because of the drugs or whatever, and people running things and all that. But can you remember going into a rave and people being divided because of race or anything like that? It didn't exist. If you remember, you had football lads, firm lads. If you went to a rave in Nottingham, Marcus Garvey Centre, wherever, no one cared. People were giving you water. So them days were massive. So we went Amnesia, and then it was the kind of thing that whatever was happening, it was like rave orientated. So people were having house parties. It was rave. People were setting up rigs in churches, church halls, and just having little raves there. So I'm thinking at the time, well, sod all the going to Ritz's or whatever and having to get suited and booted. I can come here in a Fila tracksuit or whatever it was at the time and just have it here all day long, and that was great. So as the rave scene went on, the MCs got a bit more louder and a bit more vocal. So I used to look at the MCs and I used to think to myself, you know what, I think, I used to see the people around the MCs giving them the love, that they were the centre of attention. And I thought to myself, I think, I ought to try a bit of this. So you just start grabbing the mic at parties and things like that and doing a bit. And before you knew it, people saying, oh, well, do you want to come on this night? But I never really got like a regular on the Leicester scene or Midlands until the Jungle came in. Can you remember when the Jungle came in?
What year would that have been?
94, 95. So it was like rave music, but it had the hip-hop samples, the reggae samples. So I suppose it was a lot more black orientated, but still when it first came in, everyone got on it. It was jungle. The B-lines were brilliant. You had artists like Goldie and that bringing tunes out. It was good. And I thought to myself, this is right up my street. This is a bit of me, this. So I ended up grabbing the mic at a few parties, getting a bit of a name for myself. And before I knew it, I was... a lot of nights that was happening in Leicester and the Midlands, I was MCing at, which was great when it was first going about. Jungle was there. At first it was like, You'd had everybody dancing. You know, it was sexy. You know, the women and the girls were having a good skank to the old jungle. It's before it was even called drum and bass. And then it got dark. You know, it got to the point where rather than going in a club and, you know, you're seeing people dance all up front, you're seeing people holding corners. You're seeing different crews, you know, sort of. I think Manchester and Nottingham had a bit of a vibe going on. Can you remember the Starlight 2001 club?
I do.
Yeah, well, I was in there one night and the rumour was that a gunshot had gone off. Now, I don't know how true that was. We all heard a bang. I think you can still get the clip on YouTube. But it just went from peace and love on the rave scene to everybody getting on, you know, not meeting people that were from Nottingham, Manchester, wherever.
I think there was definitely something in that, Kelso, because funnily enough, I used to work on Lee Circle at the time. And I remember going into work the next day, or trying to get into work the next day, and it was completely cordoned off. You know, they had the forensics out there, and it was all to do with that gunshot incident.
People were going to raves, jungle raves. I mean, we must be talking, because it came in at about 94. 95 was cool. 96 started getting a little bit aggy. 97, 98, it must have been around them times. And it started getting, you know, but because I was young at the time, that was me being close to the danger. I didn't really care. If I look back now and think, you know, there were some dodgy characters. You know, people going to raves with guns. I'll give you an example, yeah? I went to a rave. We got in, can you remember the White Room?
Vague.
It weren't around for long. It was in Leicester. Used to do jungle raves. Me and my mate just blagged our way in, me and Kieran. Yeah, we blagged our way in. We must have been about 16, 17, something like that. We blagged away in this rave and we're like, oh, this is brilliant. We ain't even paid. We've seen his brother in there who was a bit of a lad, well known in Leicester, his brother. And he's like, what are you doing in here? And we're like, what do you mean what we're doing in here? What are you doing in here? He's like, no, because he was older. We used to look up to him. He goes, get out of here. There's bare gunman in here. They were his words. I can remember them to this day. There's bare gunman in here. People carrying guns. So because we respected his brother so much, and because when he said get out, we got out, it was like, well, we better get out then. You know, he's talking about people going to raves carrying guns. I mean, can you imagine going out for the night, say, right, I've got my, I've done my hair, everything looks all good, got my new shirt, there's my gun. That must have been the mentality. I'm not saying everybody did it, I'm not saying everybody went to jungle raves carrying guns,
but there were guns.
But there were people with guns in the raves. And when you think about that now, you're thinking, I mean,
because guns were not as prevalent then anyway, were they? I mean, you do hear a lot about gun crime then, but not so much back in the 1990s, but it was occurring then.
And people going to raves with guns. I mean, I can't get my head around it now, but at the time, because I was like 16, 17, however old I was, it was like I was close to danger, so it had like an appeal. Do you understand what I'm saying? It was like, well, yeah, because no one's going to shoot me because I'm just a young kid, but you don't have to be there amongst it for a bullet to hit you, do you? But I weren't thinking like that then. Now, I wouldn't go nowhere near anywhere if I heard anybody had a gun. But back then, it was just sort of like, yeah, we'll go this. And I used to hear it on the tape packs as well. So you'd have... It was tough MCing as well sometimes, because I think even up to the early 2000s, so someone had booked me to MC... So I'd go, now if you was MCing at a big club, a big rave, you was okay because the security used to be bang on. But if you was MCing at, say, a club, you turn up to MC, there'd be the home MC. So say like I was in Liverpool or Nottingham or wherever it was, you'd turn up, but there'd be the Liverpool MC there. So then it became territorial. So he's there with all his boys. I've just turned up with one or two people. And then his boys want to get on the mic. So they're just trying to muscle you off the mic. Now, you're looking at the odds and you're thinking, you know, I'm out of town. There's 2 or 3 of us. There's 10 of them. The odds ain't looking good. But then you get to the point where you'd have enough of it. You know, you'd think, well, no, I'm not going to be muscled off the mic. I'm here, I'm booked. I'm going to do my thing. But that's what used to frustrate me, because the promoters at the small nights, the promoters and the bouncers never used to do anything. So if an MC just came up, if you're stood behind a DJ or whatever in a club and an MC came up and tried, you go up to the bouncer and say, listen, have a word with him, he's not even booked. They're just shy away and the promoter will nowhere to be seen. Now, can you imagine if you was a DJ and and somebody came up with the records and just tried to hustle you off the... It would never happen. People wouldn't have it. But for the MCs, you had to fend for yourself sometimes.
Sure.
So then it got to the point where you'd end up in scrapes, end up in tear-ups, but you've not done nothing wrong. You're just... What are you doing? You're not just coming and muscling me off the mic. What are you doing, mate? So then you'd end up in a tear-up, but then you get a name for yourself. Well, don't book Kelso, because last time we booked him, he ended up fighting, he ended up... So it was like a catch-22. And at the time, because I wanted to... My heart was in the game, my heart was in MCing, you'd still go. You know, you'd still go and... But in the end, I just thought to myself, I can't be doing this anymore. I can't be getting into bloody fights because I want to MC. And
were you getting decent money for the MC?
No,
or
no. If you got a big gig, you'd get good money. Sometimes you'd do it as... How it'd work is you'd do it as a favour for someone. So they'd book you, you'd book them. So it was play for play, and that'd get you across different towns. I got a residency at a place called the Glass House in London, which was amazing because a friend of mine, Priyesh, I think he went to uni in London, but he got in with some guys. He was a DJ. And they booked the Glass House. And that was a club on the River Thames. Amazing. So you'd be MCing, you'd be looking out, and you just see the River Thames and the boat parties going down. Brilliant. This is in the early 2000s. So I was happy with that. When I got that, I just thought, I don't need to be messing about in these little clubs and stuff like that, because at least once a month, or I think it was once every 2 months, I was MCing at the Glass House. Big artists, looking over the River Thames. You know, this is London. So I was sort of happy with that for a while. And that was a paid gig. You got your expenses as well. But nothing lasts forever, does it? So when that sort of fizzled out, I'll tell you what happened to the drum and bass, tell you what happened to the jungle. Everybody, at a certain point, I think it was 1998, everybody moved on to the garage. So all the bad boys and all the unsavoury characters or whatever, the people that just wanted aggro, that kind of shifted over to the garage. And some people will probably sit with me and say, oh no, it didn't happen like that. I know it did because I was there. So it went from drum and bass gigs, jungle gigs, drum and bass, it became kind of clean again because everybody, all the sort of bravado had moved over to the garage in 98, 99. So that's where all the aggro was. And the jungle just turned into, it was like students wearing combats that were coming out. So for a while, for a couple of years, it was good times again on the scene. But nothing lasts forever, like I said before. And can you remember I don't know if you remember what was happening at Garage Do's, and I think Dizzy Rascal got stabbed in Iron Apple, and Birmingham were saying you can't have no gigs on until a certain time. You can't have no gigs on past a certain time. It just, people can say what they want, but it just went, the same thing that was happening on the jungle scene when that first came out began to happen on the garage. And if you remember when the garage first come out, it was all happy. All the MCs were, it was about being bubbly and being happy. Then it changed from one guy being on the mic, being happy and hosting and chirping people up, to 3 or 4 people on the mic. And then they start talking about ends and start talking about this. And again, it just, it
comes to a natural conclusion.
It just comes to a natural... I used to say to people, promoters I knew, why don't you put a garage night on, or why don't you put Kelso? No, I'm not doing that. The last one, people were stabbed. And that's how it got. And it's a shame that it got like that, because it was bloody good music and we had some good times on it. But, people can sit here and say what they want, but that is what happened. And I think that's where the garage, when people are MCing over the garage music, that's where the grime come from, and ultimately drill, or whatever they're calling it now, because you'd have the B-lines, you'd have people MC, and then it, like I said before, it became just one man on the mic, hyping the crowd up and hosting, to 3 or 4 people on the mic. Then it got a bit darker, and then that's where the grime came from. There was a tune called Oi, who's that gone in for me? Oi, who's that? Can you remember that?
No.
But that was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, someone's bound to say, oh no, you're wrong there, but I think that was like the first kind of grime tune that came out, but it came from the garage. And then it was about attitude, bravado, and I'm not knocking anybody for making the music, I'm not knocking anybody for being involved in it, but that's how it was. That's how it came about.
So eventually, you just had enough of it, I take it, and then you thought, I'm going to push on and I believe the partying continued, but in a different way.
Yeah, it just always be a bit of a party lad, you know. But I just didn't want the aggravation. I just didn't want the aggro of being involved in something and having the aggro of dealing with promoters and dealing with the politics that was in all that scene, MCing, and then dealing with the aggravation that was going on at night, watching your back, getting involved in tear-ups and scrapes. I just thought to myself, I don't want none of this. So I just completely went off it, to be honest, for a bit. I mean, it was still there, but I just thought to myself, I can't be... And that's when I started writing, I think.
And how old were you when you put a stop to all that, would you say? Mid-late 20s?
Yeah, it's going on, if I'm not mistaken, you know, because your mind plays tricks on you, doesn't it? But I think it were late. I mean, I'd still go to the odd gig now and again. I'd still, like, there was an old school night a couple of years ago. Someone says, oh, do you want to MC on this old school night? You know, and I MC'd on it, you know. But as for making a name for myself in the scene and climbing the ladder and all that, that just went, yeah, I think I was in my late 20s, early 30s, something like that, if I'm not mistaken. It was just...
And how would you describe your state of mind at that particular time, Kels? Because obviously, you know, if you're out partying a lot, there's a lot of temptation out there. There's a lot of drink. Drink plays a bit of havoc with the old mental health.
Yeah, it does.
I think as we get a little bit older, we possibly realise how much it does. But at the time, you think you're having a good time, but maybe not quite as good as you thought it was.
No, and sometimes it wasn't having a good time. Sometimes it was escaping. You know, it was just an escape because, you know, sometimes the people you meet, the lad you meet in the pub is very different to the lad that you'll meet sitting on his own on a Wednesday night. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, as blokes, doesn't matter what we're going through, we're all right in the pub because your mates are there, giving you a pat on the back, the camaraderie, that's all good. But they don't go back home with you. You know, you go home on your own and face the thoughts and the feelings. For me, it were just feelings. Somebody said to me once, I'll tell you who it was. He didn't say it to me. He said it on a video. Do you ever heard of a guy called Jeff Thompson, Coventry?
I read about him.
Yeah.
I looked into him.
Fantastic guy.
When I was looking at your interview, you mentioned him on that interview.
Changed my life because he went through something when he was younger. He went through some abuse. And the same thing. Went on the doors, lad, you know, went through all that, giving him a pat on the back, having a drink and whatever else came with it, all good. And then he suffered from a really bad depression. But the thing is with depression is you can mask it to a certain point. It's like anything. It's like sticking your holes in water that's coming out of the wall. You can do it to a certain extent. But if you're not doing anything to actually deal with what's causing that flood, them holes, it's going to overcome you. And that's for me, I mean, a lot of depression talk these days is very cliched and very sort of, well, everyone suffers from a bit of depression. For me, there's two types of depression. There's depression that you're feeling crap because you're surrounded by crap people that are being negative. And there's real depression where getting up in the morning, facing the day, is a massive challenge. And that's the kind of depression that I was going through. And just coming back to Jeff Thompson, he said that when he was going through life, even when he was a big man, there was always that little boy that was abused, that was looking for attention. And that just, honestly, that was like, so no matter what I was doing, no matter whether I was out having a drink, I was with the lads out town, MCing, whatever, there's always that little boy sitting there, 7 years of age, that just wanted some attention, some acknowledgement. He ain't going away. And I'd never acknowledge it because you cover it. You cover it with trying to feel strong, or drink, or everything else, or lads, or partying, or whatever.
And where you get into the vicious cycle where you're in a depressive state, you want to get out of it, the way to get out of it is hit the town, usual bits and bobs.
100%. Because it's like, you know that the back end of it is going to be even worse. So if I went out years ago, if I went out on a big bender, just because I was feeling crap, frustrated, depressed, you know, anxious, whatever, that goes away when you're in the pub. It just literally goes away. Do you know what I mean? Because you're in the pub, you're with the lads. lads love you. You know that. You know, lads will grab you. They'll love you no matter what. The camaraderie's there. So all the depression, anxiety, that's gone. But you know it's coming back. So people say to me, well, if you knew it were coming back twice as worse, why did you do it? But can you imagine having like, and this might not sound right, but can you imagine having a really bad toothache, like the worst toothache you've ever had? And then someone saying to you, right, here's a pill. For 3 days, you're not going to feel anything. But on the third day, it's going to come back. Yeah, you'd be tempted, wouldn't you?
Of course you would.
Because at the time, when you're in that much pain and you're feeling, you know, that much frustration and anxiety and everything that comes with it, and just being lost, you just want to break. You just want to break from it. So of course and when you're in that drunk state, or when you're in a state where you're drinking with the lads or something like that, you convince yourself it's not going to be that bad tomorrow because you feel strong. You're with all your boys, but you go home, you get that hangover. The day after the hangover, for me anyway, that was when I called it the horrors. That was when, and sometimes it'd just be stupid stuff. Like, I don't remember that part of the night. What was I doing? Yeah. What did I say to that guy in the fish shop? Is somebody going to tell me that I got into a fight? Is somebody going to tell me? So then that would add to the anxiety, you know, and that's what I called it, the horrors. And it was bad, man. You know, I'd get through work. This is when I was working in the factory, and getting through work, you'd have to pretend that you was all right. Oh, what's up with you? I just feel a bit sniffly this week. But it was really tough, you know. And at the time, I didn't really have any. Well, I did have people to talk to, but I didn't know how to talk to people. So that's when I was looking at a lot of Jeff Thompson stuff, and it was literally like looking at his stuff and reading his books. It was literally like he was talking as if he was me. Like everything he described, the pain, the frustration, everything was like, bloody hell, it's like he's living my life. So I kept reading his stuff, and I just got inspired by it and thought, well, I've got to do something about this now, because at the time I think the girl I'm with now, I've been with her for 20 years, Melissa. I think it was just when I was starting to get with her, and she helped as well.
Well, that's what I was going to say, Kelso. I mean, how was it affecting your home life? Because you got kids, you got a partner, you're out and about. It's got to give somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think early days with Melissa, she put up with a lot. You know, not 24/7, but in the beginning, at the weekends particularly. And so I was always a good dad. I always looked after the kids and looked after the missus and stuff like that on the face of it, which I did. But I think she sort of forgave me, you know, and she thought, but she would encourage me to get help, you know. But I think she put up with a lot. When I think back the early days, she did put up with a lot. Probably a lot more than what people outside didn't see. I mean, I was never violent or anything like that, but it's just when I was feeling really low and I couldn't get out of bed, she'd be the one seeing it. Sure. Come the weekend, when I've got myself right again, all our friends and the friends that we've made together, a couple friends, some are good friends, they'd see how are you, Kelso? All right, they'd see that. They didn't see what Melissa was seeing. You know, they didn't see the shaking shadow little boy that was in bed, not wanting to face the world. They didn't see that. She seen it, and she didn't give up on me. Do you know what I mean? So
where did the writing come about then?
It was through Jeff Thompson that I started writing. He wrote a book, and then I've just somebody else said if you write things down, you look back on it, and then I thought to myself, you know, I think I can write a book. I think I've got a book in me. I think I had everything in my head. The start, the middle, the bit after the middle, the end. I had it all in my head. But it was just getting it down on paper. So I just started writing. And then I was reading back and thinking, well, that actually sounds all right. And what I was doing is I was comparing it to other books. So I was reading other books, and and I was reading mine and thinking, well, that actually sounds pretty similar. That don't sound too bad. So I just wrote and wrote and wrote. Stopped writing as you do. Wrote again. Looked at it, and then I eventually got it finished. It took me about 3 years. A Monster's Tale. You know, it took me about 3 years to write, and I eventually finished it. And I just started sending it off to publishers. But that writing that book, I mean, it's not, people think that's all about me. It's not all about me. There was, one of the main reasons why I wrote that is because I was suffering from bad mental health at the time. I looked at people around me. When you acknowledge that you're suffering from mental health and you're suffering from a diagnosis, when you acknowledge it and you look into it, you start seeing traits with other people. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
So then you start talking to them and it opens it up. So one of the main things in the book, what I wrote about, was the custody situation, because I had a lot of friends at the time that were good dads, but that fell out with the mothers of the children. And I'm not generalising all women here for 1 second, but at the time, them women that my mates were seeing, well, you're not seeing your kid anymore. It'd be something like that. You know, they'd have, and these were good dads. They weren't just the layabouts. They weren't the deadbeats. Yeah. These were good dads, and they were saying things to me like, "Well, I can't see my kid." Because I'd say, "Oh, how's your lad or how's your daughter?" "Can't see her, can I?" But like, what do you mean you can't see her? "I've seen you down the park with her the other week." "Well, she stopped me from seeing them." And I'm like, "Well, you know, what's that all about?" "Well, you know, we're late with the maintenance or whatever. I don't know. It's just this, that, or the other. Do you know what I mean? She stopped me from seeing them." So I'd say, "Well, you're the dad. You've got a right to see your kid." "Well, I've been to the solicitors, but they're saying this, that, and the other. That might take it." And literally, I just knew people that were being stopped from seeing the kids for what I see is no good reason. You know, now any deadbeat dad, any dad that's, I've got friends, female friends, and that have got kids, and the dad's not doing the right thing. And I'll say to them, you know, you do what you've got to do. But these weren't deadbeat dads. These were dads that were just good fathers that were just, for whatever reason, being stopped from seeing the kids. And I didn't think it was fair. And the system at the time, I don't even know what it's like now, but the system at the time, it just didn't, they had nothing. By the time they went to see a solicitor, so many months had gone by, and it was just literally, if you weren't married at the time, you literally had nothing. You had like basically no rights over your own child, and it just didn't sit right. When I seen guys going through this, like ready to give up, so that's a big feature in the book. There's a story in the book and that was inspired. That's a big feature in it. So I wanted to write the book because there was a lot of talk about male mental health. So that book is, for me, said, right, you're wondering why males today, I mean, bear in mind this is 2018, but I actually wrote it before that. You want to talk about male mental health today, have a look at this book, because these are the reasons why some working class males might be struggling the way they are. These are some of the reasons in there. That's why I wrote it, to shine a light on the reasons that I see working class males, particularly working class males, struggling with the mental health, struggling with suicide, because this is kind of thing what they go through. You know, and no one's really looking at the real reasons. You know, it was a few years ago. Well, it's happened all the it's throughout time. How much pressure was on women was really highlighted. You've got to look like the models. You've got to be this. You've got to do that. How much pressure is on men to look the part, to be the part, to have money, to be? Do you know that's? Don't think men that don't feel that pressure. You know, years ago when I was leaving school, if you had a job in a factory and you had a Fiesta XR2, you were doing well. Yeah, you see how much that's changed now. Kids that are 18 or whatever, they don't want normal cars. They want Beamers. This is how much society, the pressure, the expectation, it's completely changed now. When I was 18, 19, whatever it was, lads were asking me, come in Benidorm for the week. Now, people, 18, 19-year-old kids, they want to go Dubai. This is how much expectation has gone on in society, because we're all looking at these reality TV stars, social media, and we're all looking at this big world, that everybody's in, that everybody's doing this, everybody's a superstar. Real life ain't like that. You're putting too much pressure on yourself. But you explain that to the kids today, the young lads today, they don't know that because it's all they've known. We've known what it was like before. Do you know what I mean? This generation haven't.
And it's quite poignant there, because in a way we've almost gone full circle, because we started off by saying about traditional working class values, Terrace Street, working for a living, good morals.
50p in the meter.
And then we come forward 40, 50 years, and like you said, it's all about Dubai, it's all about Lamborghinis. Like I said, kids know more about Lamborghinis now than probably any other car. They know everything about it, the specs, the lot.
But you'd have been happy for an XR2 when you were 17 leaving. So you'd have been more than happy.
Absolutely.
And that's the expectation in how it's gone on. And people don't think that that's going to have any... it's not going to make a difference. Of course it's going to make a difference, because that expectation you're putting on yourself, it's going to come... We're not all superstars. We're not all reality TV stars, but we all want to look the part. We all want to be like them. We all want to act the part. What do you want to be like them for? When push comes to shove, there's that many people out there that you could benefit from being more like. Jeff Thompson's one of them. You know, but that's just what's being shoved down your throat 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can't get away from it. I can't get away from it. And I'm a 45-year-old man. I can't get away from social media as much as I try. I can't get away from sometimes looking on there. How's he get that? We all suffer from it. So imagine what these young kids are going through. So the mental health factor for me, it's just going to get a lot worse, because you're going to feel like nothing from an earlier age. Well, does that make sense?
It does. You're scrolling through your phone, you're seeing these images, there's small dopamine hits to the brain, but they are small, and they're artificial as well.
It's artificial.
Same as drugs.
Yeah.
The amount of cocaine that's taken by younger people, again, it's an artificial way to create dopamine in the brain. It's not a natural way. You were saying about the gym earlier. You go to the gym, I'll go to the gym. That's a natural way to reduce, enhance serotonin, dopamine. That's a proper feel good.
Yeah.
Not artificially.
And that's the thing with the artificial hits, like you say, from getting them likes or whatever on social media. How long does it last?
Yeah.
It doesn't last 5 minutes, if that. And then the come down from it.
Yeah.
You know, it's twice as worse, because it's like being on a treadmill. You've always got to be keeping up with something. You got to learn to give yourself a break, but it's hard, especially for these youngsters, because we can walk away from it and think, well, that's because we've known what's gone on before. Yeah, these youngsters, this is what they know. So they don't. My daughter don't know a life before Snapchat. I don't think. She probably does, but she's really young, or before Instagram or whatever. So to them, it's the norm. Well, what are you talking about? It's the norm. So trying to say to them, well, you know, you want to keep off that. It's not doing you any good. We'd be like your mum saying to you, we don't watch TV back in the day.
Absolutely.
Well, everyone watches telly. This is telly. If I don't watch telly, what am I going to do?
Yeah. It's out the bag now.
The cat's out the bag. So, and I believe that we've probably got more now than what we've ever had. I was talking earlier on about putting 50p in the meter. Yeah. I ain't got to worry about that now. I don't know any kid that's got to worry about anything like that. They've got technology at the tip of the fingers. Yeah, they're awash with... They've got an abundance of things. But yeah, this generation is probably less happier than our generation growing up in the 80s.
Interesting, yeah.
Do you know, when we had to strive for things?
And, you know, last 5-10 minutes, you're now working with children. So you've almost come full circle there, because you've had the working class upbringing. You've seen the highs, you've seen the lows. And now you want to put back to the youngsters. Yeah,
that's what I do in my day job. The kids that are in danger of getting expelled from school or have been expelled from school, I work with them. I work as youth family support worker, and it's good work. And, you know, I try and get this through to the kids, what some of the things that we've spoke about with the social media and stuff like that. It's just me doing my bit. You know, I can either be stuck doing a job I don't want to do and earning somebody money, or I can be doing a job where, you know, at least I'm making a difference, you know, and I'm trying to make a difference. And sometimes it is hard. It feels like you've got a shovel and you're trying to keep the tide out with it, because there's that much stuff being thrown at these youngsters today. And that's what gets me sometimes. You know, you've got people, or these youngsters today, but who are the youngsters looking to? Do you understand what I'm saying? If I go in someone's house and their kids are running around, running right in the house, do I look at the kids? Who do I look at? I look at the parents, I look at the adults. So in this society today, everyone's all too quick to say how rotten these kids are and how they're going around stabbing each other and stuff like that. But we're the ones before them, so what are we showing them? Do you understand what I'm saying? It's like... I think we mentioned talking about the song I've just done out, Crazy Youth. You've seen that. It's an anti-knife crime song.
That's right, sorry.
It's done all right. It's done well. I've got some good feedback off it. 45,000 or whatever views and this, that and the other. Why am I doing that? Why aren't you Stormzy's giving that message? Because they've got a massive platform. so many million followers or whatever, people say that this knife crime thing is being exaggerated. It's not. There's kids now on videos, kids that I know, that are going around with machetes, not knives, not flick knives, not little butterfly knives like back in the day, machetes, swords. There's videos of them having fights on the street. There's kids I know that have been involved in things recently, machetes. Young kids are going around with machetes, swords on the street. It's a common thing now, ordering machetes online. Where are these people that have got the platform, that have got the followers, that these young kids look up to? Why aren't they standing out and saying, kids, put the knives down? They're going to listen to you. They're not going to listen to me. Who are they going to listen to, me or Stormzy? But when I had the opportunity to do that track with Rob Sparks, still, we wanted to put a positive message out. And I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but when me and Rob got together, because he's an old DJ from back in the day, he done quite well back in the day, he says, do you fancy doing something? And I said, yeah, I fancy doing something, yeah, but I want to do something with a message. I'm not just going to do something for the sake of it. She said, yeah, and that's where Crazy Youth come from. Young man, stop for a while. That tune there, that's where it came from. We've done that. But we can only get so many views because I'm not worldwide famous. So it frustrates me to see that all these people in these influential positions, your reality TV stars, your Stormzys, whoever else, I can't hear them saying, kids, this is getting ridiculous now. Put the knives down. Don't leave the house with a knife. And if they are saying it, they ain't saying it very loudly because I can't hear them, can you?
Not at all. And it's all about, for them, it's all about finances, it's all about the brand.
It's all about money, brand.
They don't want to alienate some of their followers.
Justin, you've just hit the nail on the head. If they start talking about put the knives down, they're going to feel like it's they're talking soft. And it's going to alienate the whole brand. There's more important things than your brand, mate. Yeah, when you've sold 1 million records and you've got a couple of million in the bank, start thinking. Do you know what I mean? Because you're going to have kids one day. I don't know if Stormzy's already got them. I'm not just picking on Stormzy, but whoever. And you've got to think about what your kids are going to be growing up in, mate. And you're in a position now, this stuff needs grabbing by the scruff of the neck. We were talking about earlier having the odd tear up and this, that and the other. You don't want to go in town and have a tear up and end up having a tear and end up dead. Yeah. And someone's mum mourning. It's just ridiculous. It's getting out of hand. It's almost as if some of these youngsters, it's like it's not real. It's like they think they're going to stab someone and tomorrow they're going to get back up, and carry on with the day, like on the video games that they play or whatever. That's how it seems. It's getting out of hand. And it's not just the fact that even if some of the kids ain't involved in it, from working with young people, I can see the change in the mentality. The mentality now, if me and you had a tear up back in the day, 15 or 16, it'd you win some, you lose some, bit of fisticuffs. It'd be forgotten about in a week or so. People would be talking about something else. When something happens to one of these kids, they get duffed up or whatever, they can't forget about it because it's on bloody social media. Absolutely. And people are replaying it and replaying it and replaying it. So,
and once it's out there forever.
Once it's out there, you can't get rid of it.
Last couple of minutes, what's the future got in store for you, Kels?
I've got another book coming out, I think around March time next year, called A Lockdown Tale. Because it's been I've been really outspoken about the old lockdown and all the restrictions and all that. I didn't agree with them. Obviously, we ain't got time to get into all that. It's not something that I agreed with. And I've seen how it affected people. So the working class people who I've seen affected by this whole COVID thing, they were mainly affected by the restrictions. And so it's a book that's based on the Leicester lockdown. So when we was in Leicester and we were the only ones in the whole country that were in that lockdown, it's sort of a fictional story about that time period. It's about someone waking up out of hospital, a heroin addict, but waking up being in the local lockdown and thinking, what's going on? And it's coming out. LR Price Publications have published that, so that will be coming out in March. Brilliant. Obviously, A Monster's Tale's still out there. Crazy Youth is still out there as a song, so yeah, that's on Spotify. I've got to give myself a bit of a plug. Crazy Youth EP by Rob Sparks and Upriser. So hopefully I'm just getting started, Justin. Hopefully, but who knows what the future holds? We've got to keep plugging away, ain't we?
Well, we'll have to get you back maybe after the book's been released.
Yeah, brilliant.
And we can have a chat about COVID, because I think we might have very, very similar views.
Yeah, I picked that up on the way in. Yeah, but yeah, it's been brilliant. You know, it's been talking to you, and
it's brilliant.
I said to the missus, sorry to cut you, I said to the missus before I'd done this podcast, I'm getting a bit anxious. You know, I'm not sure if I'm gonna get put on the spot. Don't know what to say. She goes, "Don't you worry, mate. You'll have plenty to say. You won't run out of things to say." So that's my missus Melissa, like, so she knows me. So
brilliant, Kelso. It's been a pleasure.
Justin, thanks very much, mate. It's been brilliant. Thanks a lot, mate. Brilliant. Pleasure. Thanks a lot.